Hello, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we are digging into a really important report from a tech advisory group called Virtualization Options LLC. What we're going to do is translate the, let's face it, pretty complex environmental footprint of data centers into a clear, strategic briefing that makes sense for business leaders. So, let's jump right in.
All right, so let's tackle the big question right up front. Why all the urgency? I mean, why is this topic, which used to be locked away in the server room, suddenly front and center in the boardroom? Well, it really boils down to two things you just can't ignore.
First up, it's stakeholder expectations. A massive 85% of major investors are now looking at environmental metrics when they decide where to put their money. And listen, this isn't just about looking good, it's about risk management and your basic ability to get capital, which of course brings us to the second and maybe more painful factor.
And that's cost. You knew it was coming, right? It always comes back to the bottom line. The report points to an average annual increase of 30% in what it costs to power and cool a data center. That's been happening for the last 5 years. A trend line like that, no executive can afford to just let that ride.
So you take that investor pressure, you add in those skyrocketing costs, and then you sprinkle on a bit of tightening regulation, and suddenly data center strategy isn't just a tech issue anymore. It's a core business imperative that needs executive-level attention, period.
Okay, so before we go any deeper, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What is a data center? Well, simply put, these are the physical engines powering our digital world. You know, they house all the computers, the storage, the networking gear, everything. And whether they're gigantic, hyperscale campuses or tiny little edge sites, they all share one thing in common. They are incredibly hungry for resources. And that resource-hungry nature, well, it shows up in a few key places. Let's unpack the three main environmental costs here. We're talking energy, we're talking water, and we're talking about the stuff that often gets overlooked: manufacturing and waste.
The amount of energy we're talking about is just wow. In 2022, data centers around the globe used about 460 terawatt hours of electricity. To give you some perspective on that number, that is more than the entire country of Spain uses in a year. Just incredible.
And what's putting fuel on this fire? Well, it's the rise of things like AI. The report points out that training just one single large AI model can burn through more electricity than hundreds of homes use in an entire year. So this isn't just slow and steady growth, it's a whole new, kind of exponential driver of demand.
But, you know, energy is only part of the equation. There's another critical resource that often flies under the radar, and that's water. Think about this. Just for cooling, data centers in the US alone are drinking up an estimated 1.8 billion gallons of water every single year.
And to make that huge number a little more real, a single large data center can use as much water in a year as a small town of, say, 50,000 people. This really shows you how these facilities can end up in direct competition for resources with the local communities around them.
Then you've got the hidden impact. It's what we call embodied carbon, or Scope 3 emissions. And this is a really mind-blowing insight. For a typical server, about 60% of its total environmental impact comes from just building it. The mining, the manufacturing, the shipping, all of that happens before you even plug the thing in.
And the impact doesn't stop there. Think about the constant 3 to 5 year equipment upgrades. That creates mountains of e-waste. The backup batteries contain tons of lead. And the facilities themselves, they can create noise pollution and issues with stormwater runoff. Each one of these is a potential headache, both for your reputation and legally.
The really key thing to get here is that these impacts, they don't just stay inside the data center's property line. When you get big clusters of these facilities, they create these huge ripple effects that can fundamentally change entire regions. Let's see how that works.
So let's take Northern Virginia as an example. It's one of the biggest data center hubs on the planet. In that region, data centers now consume an unbelievable 20% of all the electricity. 1/5 of the power for the whole area. Just let that sink in.
This intense, focused demand puts a huge strain on the power grids and the water systems for everyone. It means you have to build new infrastructure, and yeah, it can lead to some very real tensions with the community over how land is being used and whether the economic boost is actually worth the environmental cost.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem, and it's a big one. But the good news is there are really clear, actionable things leaders can do. So let's shift gears from the problems to the solutions
and walk through a practical playbook for taking action.
This playbook, which comes from the Virtualization Options LLC report, lays out a simple but really powerful three-step framework. First, you have to measure what actually matters. Second, you have to innovate in how you design and operate. And third, you need to restructure your whole IT approach to be more efficient.
Step 1, measurement. It's the old saying, right? You can't manage what you don't measure. The key metric here is called Power Usage Effectiveness, or PUE. A perfect score is 1.0. An older data center might be sitting at a PUE of a 1.6, which means a huge slice of your energy bill is just going to overhead. A modern one, though, can get that all the way down to 1.1. That's a massive savings.
Step 2 is all about innovation, and this is where it gets really cool. Here are just a few of the game-changing technologies people are using. Immersion cooling, where you literally submerge servers in liquid. 24/7 clean energy matching, using AI to optimize everything, and finding clever ways to capture and reuse all that waste heat.
And that last one, heat reuse, is just a perfect example of the circular economy at work. Instead of just blowing all that hot air outside, some of these innovative facilities are actually connecting to district heating systems to warm up nearby houses or greenhouses. You're literally turning a waste product into a community asset or even a new way to make money. All right, let's bring this all home. By adopting these kinds of strategies, companies can do way more than just manage risk. They can actually turn sustainability into a real, tangible business opportunity with a solid return on investment. The report has this really compelling case study of a real-world project, and the results speak for themselves. They cut energy use by 20%, slash water use by 60%, and drop carbon emissions by 33%. But here's the kicker. The payback period on the investment to do all that? Just 2.5 years. Now that's a business case that gets attention.
So at the end of the day, here's the big takeaway for any leader watching this. Sustainability isn't some separate, feel-good task anymore. It's about weaving environmental thinking right into the core of your business strategy. It's how you build a company that's more resilient, more efficient, and has a better reputation.
And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Given how critical this digital infrastructure is to everything we do, how is your organization going to use these insights to build a digital future that's not just about profit, but also about being a responsible steward of our planet? It's a big question and one worth asking. Thanks for joining this Explain.